time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
Well, good morning. You've hit on the right panel. We are not only in the center of this physical space, I think we're at the center of what's happening here, and we're going to talk about entrepreneurs. But we're not going to talk about entrepreneurs in the normal sense, product market fit, what's a minimum viable product, what's a strategy, how to pitch for investment. We're going to talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur on a day-to-day basis, what it means on the emotional side, what entrepreneurs do. Now, as Ben said, that I know a little bit about being an entrepreneur, having worked probably with dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of entrepreneurs, all of which are clean tech entrepreneurs. And he mentioned that I had started 12 companies. Well, since this is a truth-telling session, I've tried to start 12 companies. 8 of them got off the ground. You see where this is going. 6 of them made a little money. 2 of them made pretty good money, and 1 made a lot of money. So I've kind of gone down the journey of most entrepreneurs, and most entrepreneurs, visit the agony of defeat slightly more than the thrill of victory. Okay, and we're going to learn about that, and we're going to learn about what it's going to be like to be an entrepreneur by hearing about the journey of the 2 entrepreneurs next to me this morning. To my immediate left is Alina Bassi. Alina is investment manager of Ananda Impact Investments. Have I got that right? Good? Okay. Very large impact investment fund here in the EU. Now, she's on the buy side now. She's determining what money goes to what companies. Before this, she was on the good side. Oh, no, she was on the sell side. She was an entrepreneur. She not only worked for startups, but she started a number of entrepreneur initiatives herself, one of which is a nonprofit called Founderland. And Founderland is focused on helping women and women of color get access to venture funding. Okay? So she knows a lot about both sides of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Further to my left is Adrian Vons. Adrian is the co-founder and CEO of Zenden, I always get this, okay? In Z, see? As you might tell, I'm from California, I'm from the US. Zenden. And Zenden is a platform that connects carbon credit projects in the global south, specifically South Africa, with corporations in the global north who want to buy those credits, and it does it in a transparent and hopefully trustworthy manner. I know I've put it down into 2 seconds. So both of these entrepreneurs have a number of things in common. From an early stage, they dedicated themselves to sustainability, I think, and they've worked unlike Mark Zuckerberg, they didn't go exactly from college to starting their own company. They've had a slightly different road, which we're going to talk about. So let's get started. And what are we going to start at? We're going to start at the beginning, of course. What's it like to start a company? And Adrian, you're up first. Okay, I want you to talk about how you started your company. What was, a lot of people in this audience may even be thinking about, I'm thinking, I have ideas. What made you go to the next level and actually make that happen?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. We already talked about before, most organized panel ever, so thanks a lot for that. But also, I'm really sad that I didn't get to know when is the best time to go to North Korea for vacation. I'm really sad about that, just mention it. As you just mentioned, Senken is a marketplace to connect climate projects in the global south with buyers in the global north. And also our companies, half in South Africa, half in Berlin. By now we're the 2nd biggest carbon removal marketplace in the world, with big buyers like Deutsche Telekom, Siemens and so on. And what made me start it, I actually was leading a research institute in Germany around innovation and sustainability, so really much what GREENTECH Festival is about. And I had a research project in South Africa interviewing farmers what would incentivize them to switch to regenerative agriculture. And they told me, yeah, subsidies like GIZ and so on, but it's really tough. And the other thing is CO2 certificates, carbon credits, but it's not working out for them. They said on one hand, the money is not arriving. So we did a lot of research, and mostly it's like they get €3, like on average, for carbon credits. And then these carbon credits are sold in the global north for €15, which is insane. So like a lot of intermediaries, brokers, trading desks taking advantage of the geographic gap. And the other thing, it was really hard for them to prove that they actually did a good job. Did my new agriculture measures actually store more CO2 in the soil? So either they said, yeah, they can't prove it, or they said, we get a certificate anyways, no need to do a good job. And when I was looking at it, I was like, damn, I wasn't an expert in carbon markets, but I always thought this is an amazing tool. We don't have a lot of tools closing the climate funding gap, but I thought this is for sure a good tool for the private markets. And I thought, okay, of course there will be some initiatives from governments and so on, but I'm not the person that put all my eggs into the government basket. So I thought like one of the biggest tools closing that climate funding gap is not working, because we need trillions of euros and dollars going into these projects. And at this point I was like, okay, it feels like these problems can be solved by technology, which there was almost no technology application in that market. So I was naive enough to say like, it's an easy problem, let's solve it. 2.5 years later, I wouldn't say it's an easy problem, but we solved parts of it.
So was it just the market opportunity or the problem that, you said you were kind of naive. We're all that way. Did you intend to start a company, or was it just a continuation of the project?
So we basically started, I said, we need to find a way to funnel capital the most transparent and easiest and efficient way to the global south. I didn't directly say it's going to be a product, a startup or whatever, but to be honest, like after 2 or 3 weeks looking into it, I was like, is no one else seeing it? But I was in South Africa, so you're a little bit isolated from the startup world. I mean, it's evolving over there, but it's not as big. So I started working on it and directly knew, okay, it's going to be a company. And then I realized, oh, there are also other people in the field, and it's like a really competitive area, but it's also really interesting for investors. So then after like a couple of weeks, I was like, let's start this company, let's be quick.
Great. Alina, I want you to talk a little bit about your, I think it was waste to biofuel startup. Same question. What made you start? What were you doing beforehand?
So prior to starting my own venture, I had spent a number of years in industry at large corporates and then at startups. And I got to a point in my life where I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had come up with an idea that I couldn't see out there in the market. So kind of similar to you, I saw a market opportunity, and at the same time thought, I think I can come up with a solution that is probably quite different to the way other people are thinking about this problem. It's the problem of textile waste. And so I had already moved from London to Berlin, and that already felt like such a big thing for me to move completely out of my comfort zone in a country I don't know anyone, I can't speak the language. Well, why not just do something even more risky and start a company?
You said, well, you'd already determined you want to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, well, like why?
Prior to starting my own company, I was working as an engineer at a coffee waste startup. And we were collecting coffee waste at large scale from coffee shops all over the UK and then recycling it into biofuels. And at the time, because I had a career in corporate prior to that, this was my first taste of the startup industry. And I loved the pace. It was so exciting. I really felt like I was changing the world being in that organization. I was so passionate about coffee waste, and I thought this is such a no-brainer. And the founder of the company was my age at the time, so kind of mid to late 20s. And I was amazed that someone who was so young managed to raise so much capital, build an entire pilot plant, and didn't even have an engineering background. So I thought if he can do it, I think maybe, I do have an engineering background, so maybe I can apply that.
Excellent. So, well, you've heard one of the main things about what differentiates entrepreneurs. They start things. It's that first step sometimes that's the most important that we decide to take. So, in taking that first step, were you scared? Not many people take that first step. You live with other people, parents, loved ones, friends. Were you getting great idea or not such a great idea? What were you doing?
I was terrified. But because I care about impact, and it's kind of been the thread of my career, and will continue to be, I felt passionate enough about the problem that even if I wouldn't make it a success, I still feel like I at least tried, and I can't fault myself for trying. So I was absolutely terrified, but I think a key part of being an entrepreneur is having that ability to feel the fear and do it anyway.
Feel the fear and do it anyway. Adrian.
Yeah, you're definitely exposed to a lot of insecurities. Not only your own insecurities, you're gonna be, or you have to be, an insane stakeholder manager, because you have, at a certain point, employees, you have customers, you have investors, you have your partner, you have your kids, you have your family, you have so many stakeholders. And before, I was working in consulting at EY, and you had stakeholders, but no one cared. It's like, oh, you work at EY, must be nice, right? Cool. You get a salary every month. It's great. But for me, it was a little bit weird. I was so excited in the first weeks that I didn't think about it at all, and then only later it creeped in. So the first weeks I was like, oh, that's amazing, no one's thinking about it, it's going to be a big thing, blah, 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 we're going to have a big impact. So the first weeks I didn't think about it, and then when we came to that point where I had to think about where do I get my salary from? I'm like, okay, I'm not having a salary anymore, and I didn't think about it the first 1 or 2 months, and then I said, oh, we have to go to investors because we need some money, because I didn't have one. The first developers are paid out of my pocket, and I was like, yeah, for the first 2 months should be fine, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't think about next steps, which is probably not smart, but and then when I was talking to investors, then I suddenly felt pressure. I felt insecure because I was like, I don't know how long this process is taking. It could be months, and then I have no salary for months. Then I can't pay the developers anymore, and so on and so forth. And then slowly these insecurities creep in. For me, this excitement was still a little bit bigger. So I was really optimistic, and I think that also worked towards the investors, because they was like, why is he not thinking about all these insecurities? Because I think I was too motivated. But for me, to be honest, the insecurities, they grow over time with the company size.
Responsibility, right? Yeah.
Then you're suddenly responsible for everyone else's paycheck at the end of the month.
So those of us who live in California, we have a very good support system. We have lots of role models. It's not unusual. In fact, it's very usual for people to start companies. But in most of the rest of the world, that's not the case. There aren't a lot of good role models for people. A company called Startup Genome, it's a research company, and it does research on startups around the world, found that 80% of all founders knew somebody, either a close friend or a family member, who were also entrepreneurs. Okay, and so that kind of served as their role model. In my case, my father worked in a factory for most of his adult life. I kind of thought that's where I was going to go, that kind of a thing. And then my brother started a computer company, and it became successful. And two things. I said, well, maybe I don't have to go down that road that I thought I had to. And two, well, if my brother can do it, certainly I can do it. And so he was my role model. So Alina, the question to you, and Adrian as well, do you have role models in your family or friends that kind of gave you some impetus to do this?
Yes, but not immediate. So both of my grandfathers, who I didn't actually get to spend a lot of time with, but I heard all the stories about them, left India and moved to Tanzania to start their own ventures. So whenever I look back to their journey, I think that was incredibly risky. And so anything that I do feels almost, super easy. I have the internet at my fingertips. I speak English. I'm living in the West. So I guess they were influences, but not ones I spent time with.
Adrian?
Yeah, for me, first of all, the background, no one in my family ever finished school, no one ever studied, and everyone started their own company. Because everyone was really practical. Like my father, he became a watchmaker. My mom is in the gemologist. I don't know if that's the word in English. Working with gemstones and so on. So then they started a shop together. My uncle has a cleaning company and all these kind of things. But no one went to university. So when I grew up with that kind of mindset, I thought that's normal. But I was then the first one going to university. So they said, no, you're not going to do that. You go to a big company and just be safe. And I was like, okay. So I basically went to that path. But it was really weird for me because I knew how my parents operate. They have their own shop, they have employees and so on. And yeah, life is just completely different. So I was really used to that life and therefore also saw that as normal. So yeah, I definitely had quite some role models on the entrepreneurial side. Yeah.
So we've heard that entrepreneurs start things, and most often we start things and we don't know where they're going, right? Certainly that was my case. And we have some people we know that kind of give us some hope that maybe we can do it. One final question on the beginning side is that I believe both of you work for larger companies or organizations beforehand, okay? So tell me what's the biggest difference in working for a large company. Now, let's assume it's a good large company, right? And starting your own company and being an entrepreneur. You can go first.
I think I already talked about the stakeholder management. That's definitely a big thing because even in consulting, you don't care if a project works out or not. Like, I wouldn't say you don't care at all, but if it doesn't work out, you go to the next project. That's basically the feeling. And
you're going to get a paycheck no matter what.
I get a paycheck no matter what. And usually they don't fire people because they lack talent anyway. So for me, it was just a complete safety. That's definitely completely different now. Like this insane safety that I probably also didn't value at that point. I was like, oh, that's normal, blah, 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 so boring. It's all right. And then only when I started the company, I was like, sometimes I also would love to wake up and not think about anything and just say, oh, my paycheck comes in anyways. So that's for me a big difference on the I would say bad side of entrepreneurial life. But of course, then I didn't work really well in the consulting space because I grew up with entrepreneurs all around me, and it was really weird when they said, oh, sorry, we have this system. You only can go from consultant to senior consultant to manager to senior manager. And then at a certain point, I started my own department at Ernst & Young. And I was consultant, but all my employees were senior managers, or basically my team members. But I couldn't, the system was not working for me. So that's definitely something that I really love about entrepreneurship, where you can basically make your own rules.
Alina?
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I think depending on where you are in your life, you may need that security, right? If you've got a big family, you've got people you're caring for. And so I think I definitely didn't value the security as much at the time. But what I really felt frustrated with was, you go to work from 9 to 5, and I tend to finish my work fairly quickly, and then you feel like you just have to sit there and clock watch. I'd ask for new projects, I'd ask for more work. There wasn't enough work to go around, especially in the oil and gas industry at that time. So I'm someone who needs to be keeping myself busy, and I like to put my brain to something. And the fact that I only could really use my brain for 2 hours a day, and then the rest was just sitting there and waiting till 5 p.m., it was my worst nightmare.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what a day-to-day life of an entrepreneur is. And, I think one of the characteristics that define the entrepreneurial environment, if you will, from the normal life is the degree of chaos and uncertainty that we deal with. And that's obviously partly because the companies are new, we don't know if they're going to succeed, and the markets are embryonic, you don't know where those are going. But it's also because, you're dealing with new problems all the time and new projects. And so I found that the degree of uncertainty is probably the biggest difference that I've felt in starting companies and working for other companies. Do you guys agree, disagree? And if you agree, then how do you handle it? Because a lot of people, that's not a good thing. Either one, jump in.
Do you mean as an entrepreneur?
Yes.
Yeah. There is a high degree of uncertainty. However, having been in the corporate world where there were massive layoffs in different organizations that I was in, you suddenly realize that there may be a sense of security, but at the same time, it's not necessarily true.
Interesting. Yeah.
So then you might as well work where you enjoy it.
So that's offset perhaps by a sense of, controlling your own destiny as much as Adrian?
Yeah, so as I usually live in South Africa, I last year did like a really special safari where you sleep in the Kruger Park and you go on trekking and so on. And a trekker told me something, and I was like, that's how I feel as an entrepreneur. He said, as a trekker, I don't know where I'm going, but I know how to get there. And that's what I feel as an entrepreneur. Like, so many open things come up that I have never handled before, but at a certain point you feel confident that you solve it.
So, do you think you can teach? To me, the dealing with uncertainty and the lack of pure data is the differentiator in terms of being an entrepreneur. Is that something we can teach? I mean, can you, or is that just something you have to learn through experience to how to handle it?
While I was still in consulting, I read so many entrepreneur books. And I was always a little bit cocky, and I was like, yeah, it should be easy. I read all the books. And I went into so many situations where I'm like, I read about it, but I did it still completely wrong. So I think it all goes through experience. For sure. I think books definitely help you a little bit, and teaching also helps you a little bit, but in the end, it's experience. It's also funny that now you're on the VC side. So many VCs told me, I don't invest in first-time founders. And I was like, what are they talking about? Like, if other people made it, I also will be able to do it. Like, it doesn't matter if it's first-time or second-time founder. But now, after like 2.5 years, I was like, I get it. It makes sense. It makes sense. I lost so much time, so much money because I made mistakes that I would never make again. But I read about them before. Didn't change.
So another thing that differentiates being an entrepreneur is the trial and error. And by the way, in most of the world, once again, that's not a good thing. Failing is not a good thing in most of the world. My favorite quote is a American inventor by the name of Thomas Edison, who said, I haven't failed, I've just tried 10,000 things that didn't work. And that is really the spirit of being an entrepreneur. Of course, the idea is to try things. If you're going to fail fast, learn something. So give me an example of that in your experience, where you've tried something, it either worked out perfectly or didn't work out, and kind of what you took away from it. Adrian?
So first of all, I think you have to lay off that fear that you could fail, because you need to, it's always about this iterating, and failing, so to say. So I don't know of examples. There are like a million things that I tried, from products where we already interviewed 10 people and we thought like, oh, no, that's definitely working. And we launched it and no one used it except these 10 people. And so a lot of these things, I think the thing is that you have to get comfortable with it, and you also need to make decisions quickly. So the thing, like one thing that's like we also saw is that if you have the data at a certain point, just kill your darling and go to the next one, and you have to continuously do that. And the one thing is that you as a founder maybe at a certain point get it, but your team is not. So you also have to work with them, teach them, and then of course be that role model and also give them the confidence to make the mistakes and create that environment. I think that for me was even way harder than for myself.
Not exactly the same thing, but we talked about inflection points, and how you learn from maybe a not perfect product market fit. Tell me a little bit about, and then how that helped your company.
So for the product market fit side of things, of course, at a certain point you try, and this insecurity probably is the biggest insecurity, especially in that phase from, I would say, pre-seed. You get your first money and invest in your idea and you as a person, to the point where you at a certain point also have to prove some numbers, right? You have to show like, I have some customers and so on, but you don't know how long this phase will take. It could be a month, maybe your third iteration works, but it could be 1,000 iterations and it takes you 3 years. So that insecurity, that definitely is a tough one to cope with in this phase. Of course, there will be other insecurities in other phases. But it's an amazing feeling if at a certain point you realize, oh, people are asking for it, people coming back. You don't have to do like 1,000 cold outreaches and no one reacts, and you're like, oh my God, another one of those. At a certain point you feel the momentum coming. You feel like people responding, you have inbound people going to your webpage and so on. And I think it's always hard to measure, like at a certain point where you say like, okay, that's it, but it's a feeling at a certain point. And the inflection point comes when you then also, your team, or everyone is feeling it. You have customers that say like, oh, I would be so sad if your solution wouldn't be there anymore. And that suddenly changes, for us at least, changed everything. Because at a certain point you can build on top of traction, you can build on top of revenue, you can hire people that maybe are not made for being your first, second or third employee. You can also hire people that at a certain point are able to maybe execute certain kind of things.
Alina?
Yeah, a lot of what you said I really resonate with. The way we've seen sort of interest kind of grow organically was really interesting. So at Clydely, my startup, we were creating a solution for textile waste. And I wasn't entirely sure if the industry really cares about where waste goes, what happens to it, how it's going to be recycled, and where it essentially ends up. But what was really nice for us kind of fairly early on when we started the organization was we received a lot of inbound interest from some really large textile producers or brands who said, we've got thousands of kilos of waste and we simply cannot get rid of it. We don't want to sell it on the secondhand market because maybe it reduces the brand value. So we're looking for solutions, but ultimately the solutions in the market right now are not able to recycle waste at scale. So we were quite lucky that quite early on we got some really decent validation. The challenge that then came was that they don't necessarily want to invest into new recycling technologies. Because brands almost say, well, yes, I produce these textiles, but it's not really my responsibility. I'd rather pass it on to you and then you deal with my waste. But they won't necessarily say, yes, I'm going to put the capital behind investing into a recycling technology. So in our case, I think if governments had added more pressure and legislation to waste producers, then I think in hindsight it would have been easier.
I want to talk about what's the hardest part of being an entrepreneur. But Alina, I want you to talk about what's the hardest part in dealing with entrepreneurs, since you're on the buy side now, and I suspect you meet a lot of entrepreneurs. Yeah, what's the hardest part? What would you like to, you know?
I feel so grateful that, well, one, I have the experience now, understanding what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So I have an immense amount of respect for the founders that I get to talk to every day. And I can't believe that I get paid to listen to these incredible ideas and potentially fund some of them. So it really feels like a dream job. But the difficulties that I find with dealing with entrepreneurs and issues that I also faced is that you do feel like you have to have your game face on all the time. And things may be going completely topsy-turvy in the background and you cannot tell anyone. And now as an investor, when I meet entrepreneurs, I can tell something is bothering them. Something is going wrong. They're not okay. They're not their usual self. And so for me, it kind of rings alarm bells that they need help. And the way that I dealt with some of those issues was to have a coach. And startup coaches almost became startup therapists. I mean, they were the only people I could really tell what was happening. You know, I'm having issues with my employees. I'm struggling to deal with my investors. So that's the things that I try to... I know that now being an investor, they have to have their game face on towards me. And that the hard bit I find is giving them that outlet to at least be able to get that stress and frustration out, and then be able, and also building that trust. So the way I build trust with them is to share my experiences and hope that they feel comfortable enough to then share some things that they may be going through with me.
I'm told that we're running out of time. How could we be running out of time? Okay. So one more question, each of you, okay? When you think about being an entrepreneur and being successful, what are the characteristics? You know, like what do you got to have? You first, and then Adrian.
A get up and go attitude. So you need to have this sense of, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to figure it out. With that, you need problem solving abilities, because you're trying A, B, C, D, and E. And then the most important is resilience, because you will get knocked down by terrible customer calls. Your employees are frustrated with you. You're struggling to fundraise. And then you have to deal with potentially tough investors. So the resilience to keep going and knowing that you care about your problem enough to kind of see it the long run.
Make it happen and be resilient. Adrian?
These are already perfect, but I would add one thing. So first of all, I'm a deep tech engineer, and I realized as an entrepreneur you have to be always selling. So
yes.
a thing that I studied engineering because I'm not good at it, and then when I started the company I realized you have to be always selling, to like on top of the things you just said. You have to always sell to your investors. You also have to sell to your employees, maybe new ideas or new ways to do it, or other things. You have to sell to your partner. It's like, hey, so I'm going to do this startup. It's going to be great because you have to sell to everyone around you all the time, and it needs to be different stories. There is your founder story that you maybe have towards the investors. There is your customer story towards customers, and so on. So you need to be always selling.
So on that, always be selling, we're going to end. Alina, Adrian, thank you very, very much. And folks, thank you for spending a few minutes with us.
It's time to wake up.